Hi, I'm Cathy Skipper and I'm a menopause midwife. In this video, I'm going to talk about menopausal rage. So first of all, menopausal rage is a thing. I always knew that women felt angrier than usual during perimenopause, or many women did, but I had no idea menopausal rage was actually an official name for this. So that's what we're going to talk about today, anger and rage during menopause. And the first point I want to highlight, which I think is important, is that yes, as usual, we can attribute anger and rage to the hormonal changes that women experience during perimenopause. But I think we have to hang on a moment before we go speeding on and think, oh, well, if hormonal changes are creating rage, then we just have to, take HRT or take something to control the hormonal changes. Well, that's not actually true. If we look a little bit more closely at this, yes, fluctuating hormones that change serotonin levels, that affects mood, can probably have an effect on women's rage and anger in the sense that it will make it harder for women to hold their rage and anger back. So when they feel it, instead of being able to hold it down or repress it, because of these hormonal changes, it comes out more easily. But this doesn't mean that the anger and rage were created by hormonal fluctuations at all. Although they make it harder to deal with or to control the anger or rage, it must have been there in the first place. It didn't come out of nowhere just because a woman reached perimenopause. So I would say, through my experience of working with hundreds of women during perimenopause, this stage in a woman's life, be it anger, be it rage, be it anxiety, be it sadness, be it grief, be it shame, be it joy, whatever the emotions are that have been buried, often deeply, this is a time where they naturally come up to be integrated. It is part of the perimenopausal journey. So, all that to say, in this video, I'm going to be not talking about how to control or numb menopausal rage. I am going to be talking about how to honour women's rage, how to look at what it needs, and what's the truth behind each woman's rage. Okay, so women's rage and anger goes back a long way. It goes back throughout a woman's life often. It goes back through her motherline or the women whose shoulders she's standing on. It goes back collectively in the culture she's living in. And because menopause is a time when women are dealing with their own journey of change and transformation as they work their way towards hopefully wise elderhood, they are also in this change feeling into the collective more. So what do I mean by that? So just very quickly, if you think of the energy that naturally comes through a woman when she's having her period or when she's giving birth, both those things, the contractions of having a period and the contractions of giving birth, are a sort of physical energy that comes through the woman. We can't control it. It comes upon us. And it's a bearing down energy. Well, in perimenopause, one of the most common changes that many women in the West anyway encounter are hot flashes. And again, it's an energy that comes through a woman that we can't control. We don't say, hey, I'll have a hot flash now, but I won't have one later. It comes through us. But for those of you who've already experienced hot flashes, you'll know this energy doesn't go downwards like the energy of our period or the energy of birthing a child. It goes upwards and sort of through the head. And it connects us, to the collective. There's a shift in perspective from being in a nest or, the hormones, even if women haven't had children, our hormones are geared towards, nesting, nurturing, creating homes, mothering, all these youthful things that our hormones are directed towards, even if we don't choose that. And that changes at perimenopause, and there's a sort of connection more to the collective. So all that to say, women aren't just dealing with their own rage when they get to this stage in their lives, but they're also, in some ways anyway, connecting to a more collective rage that's in the atmosphere that's in the history of women and that's in the culture today. And to add to, it's a lot actually, it's a lot to deal with, so we have to honour that. But to add to all this, many women grew up in families, had educations, grew up in cultures where their anger and rage were definitely not accepted. They were taught that it wasn't ladylike to be angry. It was much more acceptable often in many people's families or cultures for women to cry than to be rageful. Which leads us in to another form of rage that is very, very common in today's world. And Marion Woodman, who's a brilliant Jungian analyst who worked with hundreds of women, she talks about this a lot in her book called Addicted to Perfection. She says that when parts of the self are not welcome, so for example, this example we've just talked about, if a child is very angry about something and tries to communicate it and is told that that's not okay, or made to understand that's not okay, then that part of her gets abandoned or pushed down into her shadow side or into the unconscious. And so even if the child is very young and isn't consciously aware of what's happening, there's a part of her, we could say it's her soul, that recognizes that it isn't being loved unconditionally. There's a condition about how she turns up in her family and in the world. She has to be a certain way to be accepted, to be loved. And guess what? Yes, this causes a deep sense of inner rage. And so what happens to all this rage? Well, as I said, it doesn't just disappear. If we don't feel it, but it's there, then we swallow it or we bury it, and it can stay for years in the unconscious. And I think in the way that I work with women, what I want to say here is that perimenopause is this in-between stage, this transformational stage, this initiatory stage, where naturally a lot of these repressed emotions come up to be beheld, to finally be heard, so that they can be integrated. And rage and anger are no exception. You know, in a way, these emotions and feelings come up because they can't be contained anymore. And in terms of anger and rage, another aspect to be aware of is that as a woman is going into this in-between stage, there are certain needs that change for her. And I think our society often wants women to stay the same. It's a very sort of ageist society where women's power is mistakenly thought to be in their youthfulness, in their sexiness. So they want women also sort of fall into that and want to stay the same. They don't want to age. They don't want to find that they haven't got a place in society. And so all that to say that they need different things during this period that they often don't even notice or give to themselves. And one of those things is that they no longer, or their psyche, the feminine psyche, is no longer aimed at doing everything for everyone in the house. For example, if a woman is starting to connect with her feelings, the survival strategy that she might have put together as a child to stop her feeling her feelings, for example, many women are codependent. They put other people's feelings first. They make sure everybody's okay and then they'll be okay. Well, these things are starting to fall away. So this anger and rage that is already there could be triggered in the household or in the workplace by a woman no longer wanting to be at the beck and call for everyone in her workplace or in her family, for example. So in the book that I've just been reading called Through the Goddess by Patricia Rice, she says, a woman entering the middle phase of life, we're cloaked in our own achievements. Sorry, I'll start that again. It's actually as women entering the middle phase of life, we are cloaked in our own achievements. We have accrued the garments of motherhood, of the workplace, of our relationships. We feel swathed and protected by all this familiar clothing. We identify ourselves by what we have accumulated. But this is merely the chrysalis stage. We are trapped in a cocoon of our own making, and we begin to feel burdened by the heaviness of what surrounds us. We can feel the weight of our layers and the desire to relinquish them. And this I really agree with. As I said, I've worked with a lot of women going through perimenopause, and it is a time of letting go, of releasing what is no longer needed, what is outdated, what doesn't fit this transformational initiatory phase. The other aspect of rage and anger is that these emotions are very heating, flame-like, fiery, and menopause has a lot of heat to it. You know, it's alchemical, we could say. And in alchemy, this heat, or calcinatio as it's called, is the first stage in any transformational cycle. So as women, we can see it when we're cooking. I mean, I shouldn't say as women because men and women cook, but when we're cooking, um, we can see that if we crack the eggs and get everything ready for an omelette and we don't put the heat under the frying pan, then nothing's going to happen. The transformation that we want isn't going to take place. And so heat is the beginning stage of any transformation. It breaks down sort of the rigid aspects of the material that's being worked with and allows the cycle to get underway. So in perimenopause, the heat gets turned up, and we see this in the form of hot flashes. So what do hot flashes do? Well, some women will say, oh, they're just annoying and that I can't bear them and I get sweaty and I just want to get rid of them. But we can change our perspective and look at them in a deeper way. And we could say that hot flashes are here to burn away what is no longer needed. And that's not just our estrogen or our fertility making hormones. Um, it's parts of ourselves that aren't needed anymore. There is a psychological aspect to this heat that comes through, and it comes through often in heating emotions such as rage and anger. So the question we can ask ourselves is, what is burning through with this heat and anger and these hot flashes and the heating of menopause? Well, I would suggest one way to start looking at this is, as I mentioned, the survival strategies that we put into place to survive in our families, to survive in a sort of male-dominated world, in order to fit in, to not be rejected. And we put these survival strategies into place many decades ago, probably when we began to understand that as girls our rage and anger were unwelcome and they're ready to be released. We don't need them anymore. They've become a burden. They helped us fit in, they helped us survive, and now they've become a burden. So perimenopause is a time, finally, not just for a woman's anger to be felt, but, and this is key, for a woman to find ways to express it. And this is especially, what's the word? This is especially potent for today's world, where there's not only all the built up repressed anger of generations that women are feeling, the women in their own lineages, the women in their cultures, but the anger that women are feeling, the present day anger that they're feeling, faced with a world where the ecological and political situation, we can basically say, is really anti-life, anti-nature. So there's a word that we could use for a certain flavor of anger, and I think this anger comes up a lot and can be very useful for women in perimenopause. And it's an anger that might come up because women are finally allowing themselves to feel the anger of past abuses or wrongs, or it could be an anger that's being triggered by the present political decisions that don't honour life. Whatever it is, it's an anger that's to do with feelings of something being wrong or bad or unjust. And this anger is often called righteous anger. There's a reason for it, and it shouldn't be repressed. It should be used to change the things that aren't right in that woman's world. So there are several goddesses who express this type of fiery anger, well-known goddesses. There are quite a few of them, but I've picked two just to mention. And they can be a sort of support, an archetypal support for women who are dealing with a lot of anger. The first one I'm sure you've all guessed, and it's Kali, the Hindu goddess. And the second one is Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess. So these goddesses are both very ancient, very powerful, strong goddesses who have the ability to express themselves in raging hot and sometimes, when needed, even violent ways. That's when justice is called for. They can be extremely violent and can destroy. So both these goddesses are strongly associated also with this energy of the hot flash, with the Kundalini energy. And I'll do another video on that at some point. But it's the energy that is really an unleashed feminine energy, sometimes called Shakti energy, that we see in hot flashes, that we feel in hot flashes. So both these goddesses, you could look into. You could research them under other goddesses, maybe in your culture, in your ancestral stories, where your people came from. There are certain goddesses that are connected to righteous anger and to heat and fiery energy. The problem with these goddesses, and here we sort of join up the ends in a way, is that they were often very negatively portrayed. And why is that? Well, because, as you as little girls were probably told, don't be so angry, be a nice, good girl, they are often negatively portrayed because they manifest this powerful primordial feminine energy that incorporates life and death, which is the feminine, birth, life, and birth or life, death and rebirth. Sorry, I was getting stuck there. So these are natural cycles, and these goddesses are really the primordial feminine energy behind these natural cycles. They represent, in a way, the most powerful aspect of life, the great void where all of life comes from and where all of life ends up. And in that energy of the great void is a transformative power, the power of this fiery energy that we're working with. So this great mother energy that they are archetypes of, Sekhmet and Kali, can support women in holding and expressing their own menopausal rage. There are places we can go still within mythology, within our culture, that can help us and support us, and hold space for women so that they can, or that we can, or that you can use this energy in a positive way. So that leads me on to the next point. Instead of exploding when we're triggered, the journey of working with this rage is to learn to contain the energy and then learn how to communicate the feelings or the rage in a way that can be heard. If we just explode, then we're called hysteric and nobody hears it. So we need to be able to express how we feel in a way that makes a difference. So ultimately, the journey, and I'm not saying you have to do it straight away, sometimes it's just overwhelming, but ultimately, this journey of getting in contact with this feminine rage is to use it as a power, use it as a power for change in your lives, change in the structures that you're living, change socially. And so, it's true that some women, they worry, if I tap into this energy that has been repressed for so long, then it may never stop. And in general, this won't happen. If women remain conscious, and that's the key, we need to work with it. We need to become conscious of, where does this anger come from? What happened in my life that hasn't been dealt with and hasn't been honoured, and the feelings haven't been felt? Or am I carrying anger and rage from women in my lineage that were unable to process it, who didn't have the support and help that they needed? This can be an ancestral issue that has then been echoed in our own lives. So we need to become conscious of where the anger comes from and how it can be used creatively for our own healing and in the world. And we do also need to recognize when it gets too much. And so when it gets too much, we need to have tools, not tools to dampen it or, medication, but tools to give ourselves time out, time to ground, time to just honor the rage and the heat, which would mean probably some alone time. You know, I've learned now, I used to explode, and now I've learned over the years what I need. And sometimes I'm able to express it, and other times I just need to have the rest of the day alone. And so I'll give myself that. And all this is really only possible, in my opinion, if women are supported, if women are seen, if women are taught by other older women how to navigate these fiery emotions, you know, in the context of their own evolving feminine journeys to wise elderhood. And so for women to be able to honor their anger and rage so they can express it and wield it effectively in the right place at the right time, there are certain pointers that I want to share here. So one of them is women's circles. Women's circles are extremely important for women going through menopause, or the support of other women. Studies have actually shown that women have much better outcomes and live through their menopause in a much more effective way when they have other women to support and share the process with. So women's circles are a great way for women to get in touch with and express their feelings. You know, the role of other women in a woman's midlife passage, I would say, is vital. And there's this desire, you know, many women want more alone time. They don't want to be picking up the pieces in the family home forever. But there is a desire sometimes, if you go deeply into yourself, for a closer, more intimate connection with other women who are able to go deeply into the self, to start to navigate what it is, the feminine, as we go towards wise elderhood. So, you know, as I said at the beginning, I'm a menopause midwife, and my work is centered around holding space for women in a group and teaching women how to navigate the feminine psyche. Because the feminine psyche isn't the masculine psyche, it is different. Menopause is a unique developmental stage in the woman's life journey. So we need to be able to investigate and navigate our own feminine psyches, which then gives us a blueprint for what it actually is. There's a wisdom in our psyche. We just have to listen. And it's really, for me, it's about making meaning from our rage, making meaning from our repressed anger, seeing where it comes from. You know, it's like pulling at threads, and they start to come and we start to understand more, or piecing together pieces of material to make a quilt. It's an analogy of how a woman learns about herself and heals herself. So we need to make meaning about our anger, see where it comes from, look at the patterns we might have inherited. And then once we've done this and we start to get a better idea about what these deep, heavy, fiery emotions are, then we can maybe even make some rituals or ritual acts to give back maybe anger that we've been carrying for others. I carried a lot of anger for my father, and I had to sort of do some ritual acts to give it him back. It was his, it wasn't mine. Or finding different ways of expressing what was never expressed, maybe through art, through writing, through going out in nature, through dancing, you know, through honoring also the righteous anger that women feel. So for those of you who are just beginning to tap into the potential of menopause and the journey of becoming the wise woman that's within you, my first advice is to start by, as I said, recognizing that anger is a part of the fire of transformation. It is here for a reason. It has been repressed and it's coming up. But it's also here because there are other things that you've done to survive that the anger needs to burn away. So in a way, this first stage, alchemical stage, is a burning away of everything that isn't needed anymore. Those things that are superfluous, those things that are outdated, And it can be parts of yourself, but it could also be relationships that don't work anymore, a job that you spent a lot of study to do and you put all your energy into and it was very, very meaningful to you, and now it's lost its meaning. These are all the things that are being asked to be burnt away. Um, and don't forget, it's an initiation, perimenopause. It's an initiatory process. And heat and anger are only one aspect. It lasts 2 to 10 years. It's one of the most powerful initiatory inner journeys that we could ask for. And so a lot goes on in perimenopause, anger and rage just being one aspect. So if we remember to slow down when the heat starts to rise, we have to become, there are Buddhist monks, they're called tumo, or the meditation they do is called tumo, and they're very highly regarded monks, and they work with the fiery energy of heat. They try and create it in their bodies as a way of purifying themselves. It's that's seen as a very highly rated aspect of Buddhist meditation, and so in a way they master heat, and that's what we need to do. Not complain about it or look for ways of stopping it, but seeing its power and learning to master this heat. Part of that is to recognize when it's just starting so we can slow down and notice. Often I ask women to notice what triggered this new cycle of rage and anger. What was it that actually made the flame ignite? And when we notice what triggered it, then this can help us to see what in our lives isn't working anymore, what isn't acceptable. This rage came through because there's an old part or an old way of relating or an old way I let someone talk to me or whatever it is that it triggered the rage. And so then the question is, what needs to go or what needs to be burned through? Okay, so if you find these videos helpful, please subscribe to my new channel so it gives me the impetus to keep going. And lots of love.